We're talking today with Kip Eideberg, Senior Vice President, Government and Industry Relations and Communications for the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. My name is Rod Sutton. We're coming in right after the election. Donald Trump is our president-elect, and we're also coming in right after AEM's annual conference, which you folks held right after the election. So, just following up on the conference, is there a sense that you can give me for what your members are feeling about the incoming administration, specifically in regards to equipment manufacturing and the construction industry?
Yeah, great question, Ron. I think that it's like any administration, whether it's an incoming administration or a returning administration, there's going to be a few challenges and a few opportunities facing the industry, and we are hopeful that we're going to have a constructive working relationship with the new administration on rolling back some of the many regulations that are making it just a little bit more difficult to manufacture equipment in the United States. So that's certainly a positive, or negatives or cause for concern, let's call it. Obviously, tariffs, and there's been no shortage of announcements from the president-elect and some of the folks on his transition team and folks on Capitol Hill who are close with him, that they are going to leverage tariffs, as a negotiating tactic, perhaps as a way of offsetting some costs, raising revenue for the U.S. Treasury. That's a concern. Tariffs are taxes. They're taxes on American businesses. They're taxes on American consumers. They're going to make us less competitive, and they are inflationary by nature. So, cause for concern. And then, there's some that third bucket. Perhaps there's some unknowns, right? The new president is going to have to preside over renegotiating USMCA, or CUSMA, as our friends to the north call it, another highway reauthorization. And so no shortage of opportunities there for the president-elect, and let's hope that he seizes those opportunities and turn them into wins for the industry.
Do you have any feel for whether or not this tariff thing is actually going to go through? Do you have a take on what will actually happen?
If I did, I'd make a fortune on the stock market. It, Not to be coy about it, Rod, but I don't think anyone can say with any authority that they know what the president-elect is going to do. Ultimately, it's going to come down to what the president decides he wants to do.
Right.
There's no doubt that he has talked about, a 10% blanket tariff on all imports. That's obviously cause for concern. He's talked about, an additional 20 to 40 to maybe even 60% tariff on imports from China. That's a concern. He's talked about perhaps additional tariffs on imports from Mexico. That's a concern. And so, obviously, the threat of tariffs is, I think it's part of his strategy, right? He wants to signal to our allies, trading partners, and some of our competitors, primarily, that he's serious about addressing what he sees as unfair practices. And so we should expect, at the very least, we as an industry need to have the intestinal fortitude to weather a steady stream of proclamations, threats, and announcements on at least the idea of tariffs. And of course, as we all know, having lived through the trade wars of 2017, 2018, this will lead to retaliatory tariffs from our competitors, our trading partners, and our allies. They are not going to just take this laying down. So now all of a sudden, American exports will be less competitive. Supply chains will be strained. It will be chaotic. So I would caution everyone to be patient, to listen carefully to what the president says, to expect the unexpected, but to at least be prepared for some tariffs in some form.
What would tariffs do to the pricing for new equipment and replacement parts? Again, given the fact that the
Yeah.
market is a global market.
Well, so last time, we have some very robust data from the last go around, right? So 2017, 2018, went up. It became more expensive to manufacture equipment in the United States. Now, OEMs did what they always do, is that they balance that increased cost of production by absorbing some and passing some of it down to the customers. that's just the reality of how you deal with rising costs, whether they are as a result of tariffs or other factors, right? Um, so if the president, and again, it's a big caveat here that we really don't know yet what he's going to do, what imports he will target, by how much. But what he's talked about would be far beyond what we saw back in 2017 with 25% tariffs. He's talking about, as I said earlier, up to 60% from some markets, right? So that obviously then would stand to reason that costs would go up, and they would go up even more likely than they did in 2017. So equipment would be more expensive to make here in the U.S. So if I'm, if I'm a fleet manager, fleet operator, contractor, and yes, an OEM, tariffs will mean increased costs.
From a whole goods perspective, is it fair to say that prices, if the tariffs go through, that prices will increase in line with the amount of the
I'm
tariff?
saying no. You cannot say a 10% tariff would not necessarily mean a 10% increase in cost of any one type of equipment. It's a little bit more complicated than that. The good news, I suppose, right, for the fleet managers, operators, contractors, is that the cost wouldn't go up quite that much, but the cost would go up. I mean, it's and frankly, it's tariffs are also inflationary. So
We've already seen like 30% increases in the cost of new equipment since the pandemic. A tariff would add to that inflationary pressure. Now we've got this IIJA funding pool that is out there. It seems to me that if we continue to inflate the cost of equipment, you're going to deflate the effect of that federal spending. What's your take on that?
I think you're spot on there, Rod. I mean, the every tax increase that is put in place, whether it's a traditional tax increase or comes in the form of a tariff, the purchasing power, the spending power of the IIJA is going down. So that makes those infrastructure projects more expensive, and it's not just the equipment prices that go up, but input prices too, right? And we've seen that across the board for infrastructure projects. They've just gotten more expensive, which means that we're getting less out of the IIJA. If it is partially funded through the states, partially funded through the federal government in the form of grants,
Mhm.
some states are holding off on these projects because by the time they started planning for them, and the time, that when it's time to actually kick them off, things have gotten more expensive. So all of a sudden, they may not have, all the funding that they thought they did. And so it is absolutely taking a little bit of the wind out of the sails of the IIJA, but yes, IIJA will the value of that will deflate 100%. And so that's a concern.
And what's your sense on the new administration's desire to continue funding at the levels that we've seen?
As much as he may be loath to uh, recognize a good legislative accomplishment on behalf of his predecessor, the implementation will take place under his watch, and there will be no shortage of ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings for him and his administration to attend to. And that's always appealing, right, to any politician. The IRA, the Reduction Act, there's been talk about rolling back some of those provisions. But as we've seen, the business community is in many instances fully behind those provisions. There's quite a lot of money in the IRA for electrification, investment in the infrastructure, strengthening, hardening our grid, supporting new technology in terms of how you power equipment, be it electrical, hydrogen, hybrid. Money for a lot of good opportunities for the industry that not just our industry, but across the board are taking advantage of, benefiting from. And so I suppose I'm a little less worried about that when push comes to shove than I am about the tariffs. Just the inflationary pressure that will come from them, and then as we talked about, right, the squeezing every dollar out of the IIJA, because there's a lot of money left on the table there that still has to be dispersed. And those projects they're creating jobs. They're
Yes.
helping your readers, right? They're helping our industry. They're helping us as a country. We need more efficient, reliable infrastructure, safer infrastructure. We need more of it. So opportunities. I think the other thing that I would watch, if I were, you know, part of the construction industry, no matter, whether you're, a contractor, a fleet manager, an OEM, is the upcoming renegotiations of USMCA, which has to kick off in earnest in 2026, or it's slated for renewal in 2026. I think how that unfolds is going to be hugely impactful on our industry. I mean, the Canadian market is critical to our industry. It's our most important market. Uh, Obviously, we've seen more production as part of that, onshoring, nearshoring that we got started under during the pandemic, and we've seen companies move supply chains, move production to Mexico, which is, that's part of USMCA, right? The reason why we have that agreement is so that we can treat the North American market as one market. So that's all good for the industry. Now, are there changes that should be made? Yes. Are there improvements to the agreement? Absolutely. So, will the president-elect just blow it all up? Or is he willing to take a more methodical approach where his team will, sit down with our friends in Mexico and in Canada and start just sort of chipping away at the margins, tweaking it, making it a little bit better? And that is something that I would watch for sure.